So, on Friday morning, Sam Altman was the darling of the Gen AI era and CEO of the Open AI organisation. And today, 1 week later, he still is. Nothing to see here, move along please. What do you mean they had two other CEOs in as many days? They offered the job to Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei as part of an attempted merger and he turned it down? And that Sam had briefly been anointed as head of AI at Microsoft, but that after 725 out of 750 OpenAI staff threatened to resign and go to Microsoft to join him, unless he was reinstated, all the craziness of the previous 4 days seemed to slow down as the main players realised this was too important for yet another knee-jerk reaction. I kid you not. Sam Altman, only days after a hugely successful OpenAI Developer Day, where he channeled his best Steve Jobs, had been sacked by his non-profit-minded board, thus also channeling his best Steve Jobs, before returning within a week. So, a bit like when Steve Jobs himself was sacked by Apple and rehired 12 years later, just for the TikTok generation. In a script more unbelievable than most of Season 3 of Startup the TV series, AI Land seemed to go la la land, just at the point where some trusted and safe pairs of hands at the tiller of the good ship AGI was absolutely top of humanity's bucket list for their AI leaders, ever since we all went and played with ChatGPT and realised just how damned clever it was getting. Anyway, let's step back up to the top and talk about how the most talked about generative AI company in the industry cleverly lowered the bar to AGI just a little by making some really dumb looking moves. I'm Tim Elsom and you're watching EYE4AI, bringing artificial intelligence to all of humanity.
I've never seen anybody do the things you do before. They say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey.
Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, oh, oh. Never seen anybody do the things you do before. Never was the EYE4AI theme tune, the amazing Dance Monkey by Tones and I, so apt. But before we go over the exact timeline of the last few days, it's kind of important to know how OpenAI came to where it is today, and how that setup caused much of its problems. OpenAI was founded in 2015 by Sam Altman, some fella called Elon Musk, Ilyas Utskeva, and Greg Brockman as a non-profit with the aim of advancing digital intelligence in the way that's most likely to benefit humanity as a whole. In a short space of time, the company assembled a team of the best researchers in the field of AI to pursue the goal of building AGI in a safe way. And after starting to make real progress with its GPT models in 2018, it transitioned to a unique capped profit model in 2019 to increase its ability to raise capital and also serve its more altruistic mission at the same time. And they said at the time that no pre-existing legal structure they knew struck the right balance. Given these two concepts are at such odds, the new governance structure essentially put the non-profit to have overall control of the direction of the company and to cap the upside of outside investors at the same time. The $1 billion investment by Microsoft at the time was the start of these two companies' relationship. And this is that structure. The non-profit entity, OpenAI Inc., became the only controlling shareholder of the new for-profit entity, OpenAI Global LLC, which answered to the board of the non-profit. So the board is primarily responsible for determining when OpenAI manages to achieve artificial general intelligence, AGI, which the company defines as a highly autonomous system that outperforms humans at most economically valuable work. The board by now consisted of Adam D'Angelo, CEO of Quora, Tasha McCauley, co-founder of Fellow Robotics and adjunct senior management scientist at Rand Corporation, Ilyas Utskeva, co-founder and chief scientist of OpenAI, and Helen Toner, Director of Strategy and Foundational Research Grants at Georgetown's University Center for Security and Emerging Technology, as well, of course, as Sam Altman, the CEO. They'd previously had a board of 9 running into 2023, with Reid Hoffman leaving for Inflection AI, and Siobhan Zilis also leaving in March, and Will Hurd leaving for a short-lived 2024 presidential run. And then came the end of last week. Let's break it down. On Thursday evening on 16th of November, Ilyas Utskeva, OpenAI's chief scientist and board member, texts Sam Altman, who has plans to head over to Las Vegas for the first ever Formula One race in the city, and one huge, no doubt, Las Vegas-style celebration of one of the already most lavish sporting events in any calendar. The text asks him to join a Google Meet the next day. Sam has no idea at this point that this is going to unleash 5 days of turmoil at OpenAI, and for him personally. Friday the 17th of November, with Sam now safely ensconced in his Las Vegas hotel and with the racing, an evening race to showcase the famous neon lights of the city, not due to start until 8:30 p.m, Sam flips open his MacBook and fires up Google Meet. It's 12 noon. On the call are the OpenAI board. Well, most of them. Tasha McCauley, Helen Toner and Adam D'Angelo. His buddy Greg Brockman hasn't been invited. Sutskever reads from a script that closely resembles the blog post the company is to publish minutes later, telling Altman that he was not consistently candid in his communications with the board, hindering its ability to exercise its responsibilities, and that he's being fired, and that the news is going to be made public shortly. The call ends and Altman finds himself locked out of his computer. Shortly after that call had finished, Sutskever texts Brockman asking him to jump on a call. After joining the call, a few minutes later, he's informed he's being removed from OpenAI's board of directors, but can maintain his role as president, but that Altman has just been fired. Shortly after that, OpenAI publishes a long blog post stating that Mira Murati, previously the CTO, would become the new interim CEO. Altman's removal, it says, has come after a deliberative review by OpenAI's board that concluded that he was not consistently candid in his communications with them, hindering their ability to exercise those responsibilities. The board determines that they no longer have confidence in Altman's ability to lead OpenAI. An all-hands meeting is called on Friday afternoon at OpenAI, where Murati and Sutskever lead the discussion as to what has happened that's resulted in Altman being removed, much to the dismay of the OpenAI team, who had no idea there was a problem in the first place. One employee asks if they will ever find out why it happened, and Sutskever replies, no. And so, as the news hits the street, the announcement of Altman's departure has an immediate effect on Microsoft shares, which drops more than 2%. Satya Nadella is furious when he finds out what has happened without any advance warning. He tries to calm the market's nerves as his share price tanks, briefly saying, "We have a long-term agreement with OpenAI with full access to everything we need to deliver on our innovation agenda and an exciting product roadmap, and remain committed to our partnership and to Mira and the team." But Mira and the leadership team are now locked in a conference room with Sutskever, telling him that the lack of detail isn't acceptable. They demand the rest of the board join a Google Meet to explain further. But despite an hour of back and forth, no further detail is forthcoming, with the board citing legal reasons for their inability to provide any more details. As well as the lack of trust, the increasing number of AI-related projects that Altman was becoming involved in externally to OpenAI was seemingly a concern to the board. The board eventually agreed to discuss the matter with their legal counsel. They returned, still not prepared to share any more details, and now the pressure is mounting even more, as several of the institutional investors besides Microsoft are pressuring the OpenAI team to invite Altman back around the negotiating table to agree a comeback. As Friday afternoon turns into evening, and in the wake of Brockman's resignation, a number of senior OpenAI executives follow suit, with the company's head of preparedness, Alexander Madfrey, director of research, Jakub Pachacki, and Shimon Sidor, senior researcher, all announcing their respective resignations. At the same time, Altman is flying back to his home in San Francisco, pondering what to do next. Whilst OpenAI Chief Operating Officer Brad Lightcap, in a memo to all employees, says that the announcement has taken the entire management team by surprise, going on, "I'm sure you all are feeling confusion, sadness, and perhaps some fear. We are fully focused on handling this, pushing towards resolution and clarity and getting back to work. We can say definitively that the board's decision was not made in response to malfeasance or anything related to our financial, business, safety or security privacy practices. This was a breakdown in communication between Sam and the board." A planned sale of employee shares on a suggested valuation of more than $80 billion is now said to be at risk. The next day, Sam Altman's home in Russian Hill is swamped by the senior OpenAI team strategizing on what to do and how to get Altman back into the company, and they begin to start using X as part of a proactive campaign to do that. Sam tweets, "I love OpenAI employees so much," and dozens of OpenAI employees tweet it back with heart emojis. Meanwhile, OpenAI's board of directors approached Dario Amodei, the co-founder and CEO of rival Anthropic, who had previously left OpenAI, about a potential merger of the two companies and to become the new CEO of OpenAI. Amodei quickly turns down the offer. Saturday evening ends with no resolution, but agreement for the two sides to talk at the OpenAI offices the next day. It's now the morning of Sunday the 19th. Altman walks into the OpenAI office for the first time since he's been fired, and has to pick up a guest pass as his badge is no longer working either. He wryly comments on this on X as he waits for his colleagues. In the end, Mira Murati, Brad Lightcap, Jason Kwon, and Brockman and Sam Altman spend most of the day negotiating with the board over bringing him back as CEO, as well as identifying new board members that can take the new leadership team forward. Reports in the press indicate maybe there is a way back for Altman, given the disconcern over the impact of the last 48 hours. The board, however, are adamant that Altman can't come back as CEO, and Altman demands the board themselves be fired. The 5 p.m. deadline for a decision comes and goes with no agreement, as they continue to negotiate into the night amongst numerous boxes of takeaway. But then finally on Sunday, there is new news, but it's not what everyone's expecting by now. That Altman is returning as CEO. Oh no, welcome Emmett Shear, founder of Twitch, to the stage for his turn to be OpenAI interim CEO. I guess that means the board also sacked Mira Murati from her position, but I'm not sure that was ever communicated externally. Alongside that news, a message on the OpenAI Slack channel hastily announces an emergency all-hands meeting scheduled with the new interim CEO. Mostly ignored, a handful of rude emojis are the consistent response, and in the end, whilst there were over 200 staff in the office on Sunday that day, barely a dozen turned up to hear the new interim CEO. And at 11:53 p.m, Satya posts again. We remain committed to our partnership with OpenAI and have confidence in our product roadmap, our ability to continue to innovate with everything we announced at Microsoft Ignite, and in continuing to support our customers and partners. We look forward to getting to know Emmett Shear and OAI's new leadership team and working with them, and we're extremely excited to share the news that Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, together with colleagues, will be joining Microsoft to lead a new advanced AI research team. We look forward to moving quickly to provide them with the resources needed for their success. And just after midnight, Elon Musk helpfully adds, now they'll have to use Teams. He probably asked Grok for that joke. And as most people are asleep across San Francisco, the OpenAI team are continuing to tweet. Brad Lightcap, OpenAI is nothing without its people. Sam loves it. Jason Kwan does the same. Sam loves it. Mira Murati does the same. Sam loves it. Maddie Siemens does the same. Joshua Ashaim does the same. Angela Jiang does the same. And Sam loves them all. And at around 6 a.m, a letter is published to X that shows that over 500 of the 770 employees of OpenAI have signed an open letter to the board demanding Sam's reinstatement and their removal. Or they're all going to leave for Microsoft. A little later at 7 a.m, Sutskever, who has signed the letter, posts a regretful message about his part in the ousting and expresses a desire to reinstate Altman. He says, I deeply regret my participation in the board's actions. I never intended to harm OpenAI. I love everything we've built together, and I'll do everything I can to reunite the company. And Sam gives that one 3 hearts. At this point, the majority of OpenAI employees are threatening to resign unless the board reappoint Altman, and he and Brockman are reported to be considering a return to OpenAI if the board members who fired him step aside, but there is no sign of that happening and the board remain silent. Later this morning at 11:45 a.m, Sam Altman says, Satya and my top priority remains to ensure OpenAI continues to thrive. We're committed to fully providing continuity of operations to our partners and customers. The OpenAI and Microsoft partnership makes this very doable. It's now about 1 p.m. on Monday, and over 720 of the 770 employees have now signed the letter. The pressure must be enormous on the remaining 3 board members. It's now about 1 p.m. on Monday, and over 720 of the 770 employees have signed the letter. The pressure must be enormous on the remaining 3 board members and the new interim CEO, Emmett, who's trying to help work the best way through the situation, whether it means he is out of a job or not. And at 1:35 p.m, Peter Wielander tweets, many of us have worked with Sam and Greg for years. They are some of the kindest and highest integrity people there are. Of course, we'll join them. 3 board members who never engage internally have had 3 days to tell their story, and they've kept quiet. There's nothing there. On Monday evening, Satya Nadella, knowing that there was a strong likelihood that Altman and team might still end up remaining at OpenAI, now goes on TV, accepting this might be the outcome and stressing whatever happens, he's behind Sam and the team, and that OpenAI would certainly need some better governance going forward. And as Monday night draws to a close, there was still no firm news either way. Tuesday morning comes and negotiations continue at OpenAI with both the OpenAI board and Sam Altman, supported by a number of outside SV pals, including Brett Taylor, Brian Chesky, with Emmett Shear trying to be the reasonable one, somewhere in the middle. A lot of the tension seems to come down to the relationship between Sam Altman and Helen Toner, who he tried to remove from the board in the weeks running up to this, in part due to a research paper she'd written that implicitly criticised OpenAI's approach and seemed to praise Anthropic, one of their competitors, but still no white smoke. And finally, at 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, OpenAI tweet, we have reached an agreement in principle for Sam Altman to return to OpenAI as CEO with a new initial board of Brett Taylor, Chair, Larry Summers, and Adam D'Angelo. We're collaborating to figure out the details. Thank you so much for your patience through this. And just before midnight on Tuesday, Greg Brockman posts the happiest picture of any OpenAI employees for 5 long days, confirming we are so back. And before I move on, I just wanted to say that despite the drama that was played out across San Francisco these last 5 days, and across social media and global news channels, and has been reported by one or two YouTubers as well, I just wanted for a moment to recognise the fact that this is also real life with real people. And so I'd honestly like to give everyone a big hug and say that I hope you're all okay, whatever side of the argument or principle you might sit. And I honestly think no one is fundamentally a bad actor here. I don't buy the conspiracy theories for a second. I think everybody has been acting in what they think are the best interests of either humanity or the safe development of AI, or their company in developing safe AI that benefits humanity but also makes some money. And that's where I think the rub comes. If anything has failed at OpenAI, it's its unique governance model that's contorted it in such a way between safety and commerciality that it was almost bound to cause fractures between the non-profit board and its executive team that straddled both non-profit and profit ambitions. So what caused the breakdown at OpenAI? Well, from my sources, there were at least 4 things at play here that came to a head last week. Firstly, the for-profit activities of the company had continued to expand exponentially, only a couple of weeks before the launch of new features, including customizable GPTs, and the idea of a future app store on the 6th of November at the first OpenAI Developer Day was seen by some in the organisation as a step too far, too quickly. There were concerns on the board, both from the advisory members as well as Ilya, who'd been becoming increasingly concerned about the pace of this change. Secondly, Altman was said to be exploring a number of other ventures outside of OpenAI, including AI chips in the Middle East, AI hardware in Japan, and even a universal basic income system called WorldCoin that might be needed in the case of AGI, that he'd first got involved in around 2019. None of these were unreasonable side hustles in of themselves, but they gave the likes of the AI safety-minded board of OpenAI further cause for alarm in their CEO. Sam's world tour that followed the Developer Day provided space for those concerns to gather momentum in a vacuum. These ventures also alarmed Ilya Sutskever, who was becoming more vocal about his concerns over safety. Over the summer, he'd set up a new team within the company focused on containing super-intelligent AI systems of the future. And tensions with Sutskever increased in October when Altman attempted to reduce his role in the business because of that conservatism. Thirdly, several staff researchers had sent the board of directors a letter warning of a powerful artificial intelligence discovery that they said could threaten humanity. And it was only the day before he was fired that Sam Altman, being interviewed in Singapore, had talked of being in the room for the 4th time in the history of AI when something remarkable had been discovered, and what an honour that was to be present for. The story goes that OpenAI were and are working on an advanced model called Q-Star, quite possibly being trained as part of the next GPT-5 model, and this Q-Star was able to solve certain maths problems it hadn't seen before, unlike the previous versions of their and most LLMs, which are a bit hit or miss on maths at the moment. The ability to solve these maths problems would be a major development in AI, and hence why there was some consternation at the progress being made so quickly. And then finally and fatally, there was an ongoing and fairly acrimonious dispute between Altman and Toner on the board about a research paper the latter had co-authored and published only a few weeks earlier on the 26th of October. The paper, published by the Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology, to which Toner is the Director of Strategy, was titled Decoding Intentions, Artificial Intelligence and Costly Signals. And here's a copy of it, all 66 pages. I've read it in full, and I wanted to share the one or two experts that were clearly the cause of the unhappy to and fro between Sam and Helen in relation to its content. So, just to set the context for the paper, the summary reads, how can policymakers credibly reveal and assess intentions in the field of artificial intelligence? AI technologies are evolving rapidly and enable a wide range of civilian and military applications. Private sector companies lead much of the innovation in AI, but their motivations and incentives may diverge from those of the state in which they're headquarters. As governments and companies compete to deploy ever more capable systems, the risks of miscalculation and inadvertent escalation will grow. Understanding the full complement of policy tools to prevent misperceptions and communicate clearly is essential for the safe and responsible development of these systems at a time of intensifying geopolitical competition. In this brief, we explore a crucial policy lever that's not received much attention in the public debate: costly signals. Costly signals are statements or actions for which the sender will pay a price, political, reputational, or monetary, if they back down or fail to make good on their initial promise or threat. Drawing on a review of the scholarly literature, we highlight 4 costly signal mechanisms and apply them to the field of AI. Tying hands involves the strategic deployment of public commitments before a foreign or domestic audience, such as unilateral AI policy statements, votes in multilateral bodies, or public commitments to test and evaluate models. Sunk costs rely on commitments whose costs are priced in from the start, such as licensing and registration requirements for AI algorithms or large-scale investments in test and evaluation infrastructure, including test beds and other facilities. Installment costs are commitments where the sender will pay a price in the future instead of the present, such as sustained verification techniques for AI systems and accounting tools for the use of AI chips in data centers. And reducible costs are paid up front, but can be offset over time depending upon the actions of the signaller, such as investments in more interpretable AI models, commitments to participate in the development of AI investment standards, and alternate design principles for AI-enabled systems. So, an interesting setup for the paper. You then have to dig in a bit further to get to the absolutely crucial passage, and I'll go to that now. Because it's fascinating. And I'm going to read again from this because you need to put yourself, I guess, both in Helen Toner's shoes and then in Sam Altman's shoes as you listen to this. To more fully understand how private sector actors can send costly signals, it's worth considering two examples of leading AI companies going beyond public statements to signal their commitment to develop AI responsibly. OpenAI's publication of a system card alongside the launch of its GPT-4 model, and Anthropic's decision to delay the release of its chatbot, Claude. Both of these examples come from companies developing LLMs, the type of AI system that burst into the spotlight with OpenAI's release of ChatGPT in November 2022. LLMs are distinctive in that, unlike most AI systems, they don't serve a single specific function. They're designed to predict the next word in a text, which has proven to be useful for tasks as varied as translation, programming, summarization, and writing poetry. This versatility makes them useful, but also makes it more challenging to understand and mitigate the risks posed by a given LLM, such as fabricating information, perpetuating bias, producing abusive content, or lowering the barriers to dangerous activities. In March 2023, California-based OpenAI released the latest iteration in their series of LLMs named GPT-4, with GPT standing for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, a phrase that describes how the LLM was built. The new model demonstrated impressive performance across a range of tasks, including setting new records and several benchmarks designed to test language understanding in LLMs. From a signaling perspective, however, the most interesting part of the GPT-4 release was not the technical report detailing its capabilities, but the 60-page so-called system card laying out safety challenges posed by the model and mitigation strategies that OpenAI had implemented prior to the release. The system card provides evidence of several kinds of costs that OpenAI were willing to bear in order to release GPT-4 safely. These include the time and financial cost of producing the system card, as well as the possible reputational cost of disclosing that the company is aware of the many undesirable behaviours of its model. The document states that OpenAI spent 6 months on safety research, risk assessment, and iteration between the development of an initial version of GPT-4 and the eventual release. Researchers at the company used this time to carry out a wide range of tests and evaluations on the model, including engaging external experts to assess its capabilities in areas that pose safety risks. These external red teamers probed GPT-4's ability to assist users with undesirable activities, such as carrying out cyber attacks, producing chemical or biological weapons, or making plans to harm themselves or others. They also investigated the extent to which the model could pose risks of its own accord, for instance, through the ability to replicate and acquire resources autonomously. The system card documents a range of strategies OpenAI used to mitigate risks identified during this process, with before and after examples showing how these mitigations resulted in less risky behaviour. It also describes several issues that they weren't able to mitigate fully before GPT-4's release, such as vulnerability to adversarial examples. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Returning to our framework of costly signals, OpenAI's decision to create and publish the GPT-4 system card could be considered an example of tying hands as well as reducible costs. By publishing such a thorough, frank assessment of its model's shortcomings, OpenAI has to some extent tied its own hands, creating an expectation that the company will produce and publish similar risk assessments for major new releases in the future. OpenAI also paid a price in terms of foregone revenue from the period in which the company could have launched GPT-4 sooner. These costs are reducible, in as much as OpenAI is able to end up with greater market share by credibly demonstrating its commitment to developing safe and trustworthy systems. As explored above, the types of costs in question for OpenAI as a commercial actor differ somewhat from those that might be paid by states or other actors. Now, While the system card itself has been well received among researchers interested in understanding GPT-4's risk profile, it appears to have been less successful as a broader signal of OpenAI's commitment to safety. The reason for this unintended outcome is that the company took other actions that overshadowed the importance of the system card, most notably the blockbuster release of ChatGPT-4 months earlier. Intended as a relatively inconspicuous research preview, the original ChatGPT was built using a less advanced LLM called GPT 3.5, which was already in widespread use by other OpenAI customers. GPT 3.5's prior circulation is presumably why OpenAI didn't feel the need to perform or publish such detailed safety testing in this instance. Nonetheless, one major effect of ChatGPT's release was to spark a sense of urgency inside major tech companies. To avoid falling behind OpenAI amid the wave of customer enthusiasm about chatbots, competitors sought to accelerate or circumvent internal safety and ethics review processes, with Google creating a fast-track green lane to allow products to be released more quickly. This result seems strikingly similar to the race to the bottom dynamics that OpenAI and others have stated that they wished to avoid. OpenAI has also drawn criticism for many other safety and ethics issues related to the launches of ChatGPT and GPT-4, including regarding copyright issues, labour conditions for data annotators, and the susceptibility of their products to jailbreaks that allows users to bypass safety controls. This muddled overall picture provides an example of how the messages sent by deliberate signals can be overshadowed by actions that were not designed to reveal intent. And remember, one of the co-authors of this paper is a board member of OpenAI. And it gets better. A different approach to signalling in the private sector comes from Anthropic, one of OpenAI's primary competitors. It even says one of OpenAI's primary competitors. Anthropic's desire to be perceived as a company that values safety shines through across its communications, beginning from its tagline, an AI safety and research company. A careful look at the company's decision-making reveals that this commitment goes beyond words. A March 2023 strategy document published on Anthropic's website revealed that the release of Anthropic's chatbot Claude, a competitor to ChatGPT, had been deliberately delayed in order to avoid advancing the rate of AI capabilities progress. The decision to begin sharing Claude with users in early 2023 was made now that the gap between it and the public state of the art is smaller, according to the document. A clear reference to the release of ChatGPT several weeks before Claude entered beta testing. In other words, Anthropic had deliberately decided not to productize its technology in order to avoid stoking the flames of AI hype. Once a similar product, ChatGPT, was released by another company, this reason not to release Claude was obviated, so Anthropic began offering beta access to test users before officially releasing Claude as a product in March. Anthropic's decision represents an alternative strategy for reducing race to the bottom dynamics on AI safety, where the GPT-4 system card acted as a costly signal of OpenAI's emphasis on building safe systems. Anthropic's decision to keep their product off the market was instead a costly signal of restraint. By delaying the release of Claude until another company put out a similarly capable product, Anthropic was showing its willingness to avoid exactly the kind of frantic corner-cutting that the release of ChatGPT appeared to spur. Anthropic achieved this goal by leveraging installment costs or fixed costs that cannot be offset over time. In the framework of this study, Anthropic enhanced the credibility of its commitments to AI safety by holding its model back from the early release and absorbing potential future revenue losses. The motivation in this case was not to recoup those losses by gaining a wider market share, but rather to promote industry norms and contribute to shared expectations around responsible AI development and deployment. Yet, where OpenAI's attempt at signalling may have been drowned out by other, even more conspicuous actions taken by the company, Anthropic's signal may have simply failed to cut through the noise. By burying the explanation of Claude's delayed release in the middle of a long, detailed document posted by the company's website, Anthropic appears to have ensured that this signal of its intentions around AI safety has gone largely unnoticed. Taken together, these two case studies therefore provide further evidence that signalling around AI may be even more complex than signalling in previous eras. I can imagine Helen Toner reviewing this paper in her role at Georgetown CSET as a non-exec, sat on the board of a not-for-profit AI company, and thinking that its analysis and critique might seem helpful and an interesting contribution to the ongoing discussions about AI safety. I could also imagine, if you're Sam Altman, being super pissed at the implied, no, pretty real criticism of OpenAI's strategy and the more positive spin given to major rivals Anthropic. Altman reportedly met with Toner and they argued about the paper. Toner defended herself, but Altman felt like she'd had dealt unfair damage to OpenAI, saying any amount of criticism from a board member carries a lot of weight. Any of these four things alone happening within the OpenAI board could have destabilised the top of the pyramid. All four of these happening in such a short space of time set the dynamics for a powerful and emotive reaction which played out on that fateful Google Meet last Friday lunchtime and since. And whilst things are a little more settled at OpenAI right now, and as they look to extend out their board back to 9 members again from a wide range of industry expertise, it has both good and worrying aspects to how it played out. One, it's clear that the development of AI, not just the AI we see in either the latest released proprietary models or the researchers and tech firms building out open source models with ever more capability, continues apace. What we see is a snapshot of history. The models we're using today are already months old. What we don't see are the models that have been being trained for the last 6 months and are about to hit the market. And therefore, there's every possibility that we're closer to AGI than any of us could imagine. I reviewed the Microsoft research team's Sparks of AGI paper with science fiction author Casey Dorman a little while back, and we were both already incredulous at some of the things even GPT-4 was capable of. The only thing that's certain is we get closer every day. And that means the need for AI safety is more important than ever. The need for our AI companies to be responsible and ethical in their development, which is crazy hard to do when you are a for-profit organisation and the race to the bottom is one for market dominance and the financial success that that brings. But it also needs to be about safety and knowing when we need to pause, when a model is too capable to be unleashed on an unsuspecting world. But how to do that when each next larger LLM with its greater capabilities and feature gives its users the fix they crave and the dealers their next big payday. This is why it's also more important than ever that the governments and institutions of the world legislate quickly but fairly to manage the greatest risks these models can bring. And that started, but frankly, it's too slow and too laissez-faire, to the point that by the time we get to that legislation we need to protect us all, we may just find the AI has defined the legislation itself, and to its advantage, of course. I'm not a dystopian viewer of AI, quite the reverse. I think it's going to bring incredible advances to the world in pretty much every field there is. But I'm also convinced that without sensible guardrails, all manner of bad actors or even just one or two greedy enterprises could create a genie we could never get back into the bottle. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive on the Open AI Ouster and the implications for us all. If you did, please subscribe, hit the like button and leave a comment about what else you'd like me to cover. But until the next video, I'm Tim Altman, and you've been watching EYE4AI, bringing artificial intelligence to all of humanity.